I would like to shoot the first question to Mr. Kishore. It's kind of a long outstanding.
Why me? Why me?
So, no, long-staying Indian in Sri Lanka, so that's an honor to have you here today. And so, first question is, you were talking about the investment climate and the conductive investment policies in Sri Lanka. So, as an Indian investor, what motivates you to invest in Sri Lanka, and what potential do you see through the cross-border investment between India and Sri Lanka?
Okay, so I think in my presentation, I think I've covered quite a lot of what actually should motivate people to invest. Not just me, any investor would look at. So what we'd look at is like, why would the investors want to look at Sri Lanka? So we've already discussed that, like loads of points that we actually spoke about, the country as in location, or the growth that is there, the potential that is there for the country's real estate to grow, because right now it's actually not exploited by major investment companies in other sectors. So that sectors would come in as well. So getting back to specifically on why, what would Indian investors look at, or what would Indian investors, or rather what should Indian investors look at? I think right now the priority is you look at the currency. As a foreign investor, whether it's Indian or whether it's any other investor, but look at the priority of, the first priority as where your money or how far your money would go. Like I said, probably a few months back, it was half what it could go, and now it's like doubled. So if you have, just come and invest in real estate, in apartments or whatever, because these are things that would actually grow. In terms of, you see the cost of construction. The cost of construction is shooting up. And you're actually getting properties half of what you would have paid for earlier. Okay, so that's something which you need to look at. We need to look at saying that, okay, I'm getting properties at half the cost, and I'm getting, the future of it is the cost of construction is going to go up. With cost of construction going, no new development could actually sell at lower than what they are selling right now. So it's basics, basically put everything together, apart from all the rest. So if somebody starts a new development, maybe, and finishes in 3 years' time, 4 years' time, he's going to charge you more, right? Already there are existing apartments, and whoever has already launched, you got huge potential, right? I mean, look at not just the value doubling, plus look at the cost of construction. If you add these two things, it's a win-win. I personally think it's a good time to invest in Sri Lanka in condominiums, considering these two facts immediately. Yes, the third advantage, which actually should say, is going forward, we're going to look at even rupees probably strengthening, which we've seen in the last 1 week, 10 days. If that happens, then you have more potential coming in, right? I mean, you're actually getting more value later on when you actually want to sell it and convert it and other things as well. So overall, yeah, I think just considering these three factors, I think not just Indians, any investor should look at getting condominiums here.
So can I just add to that? It's a very good point that Kishore flags. It's probably a better investment opportunity now to look at existing completed projects, or to pick up assets that are available in the market for sale now, rather than looking at greenfield projects, particularly given the challenges of building material availability, costs, labor. So, if I was an investor looking at two opportunities, I'd be picking a more mature asset now rather than a new development, just as an extension to what
Another point, because you touched India, I would just address it to the Indian investors as well. One of the things they should look at is close proximity. I mean, okay, like yes, there are affiliations for Sri Lankans living abroad who would want to buy and everything. But for an Indian, it doesn't need to be actually, because it's so close. It's much closer than for a guy from Bangalore reaching Colombo than reaching Delhi. I mean, it's probably, and the flight ticket probably is cheaper than that as well, you know. So there's a lot of potential. So that's where we say that, you know, there could be Indian investments that could come in quite a lot on this.
Yeah. So it's rather like investing today is much better than investing tomorrow. Yeah. So my next question is to Mr. William. So recently we signed a cross-currency swap with IFC, and then again IMF is coming, hopefully coming next week. So as an investment banker with so many years of experience, and what are the key factors that you consider when evaluating potential real estate investment opportunity in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question. Before I go into that, I'd just like to congratulate the HUM and the Lanka Property Wed team really for putting on an outstanding thing. You know, particularly now, as Kishore said, what's happened has happened. It's behind us. We're looking forward. It's things like this that'll also help to take the country forward. So, well done, guys. It's a privilege to be here to help also promote Sri Lanka in a sense, because as Kishore said, real estate is just a small part of a bigger picture. If you're talking about attracting FDI into Sri Lanka, real estate is an important part of it, but it's not the only part of it. To answer your question, so look, real estate is an asset class, quite simply. And when you look at from an investment point of view, there is always a role for real estate in anyone's asset portfolio, whether it's as a private investor or as a company. Along with more liquid assets like, you know, financial market assets, stocks, bonds, and currency, and so forth. Real estate is a particularly important one because it is a tangible asset. Again, you know, following on from, he said so many things from my script book, you know, in his earlier talk, such an excellent talk. It's an important part of an asset allocation program, but you look at the specific features of real estate, it's tangible, it's real, it's substantial, and particularly at a time of high inflation, not just here, but globally, real estate is one of those assets that traditionally appreciate and hold their value well over above financial market assets, right, where inflation erodes the value of assets, right? So real estate plays a very, very important part. And what we need to always keep in mind when we're talking about attracting investors to real estate in Sri Lanka is really the question is, what can we do collectively to attract investment into Sri Lanka, to make it easier for people to invest in Sri Lanka? And there's a long list of things that we can do here to ease the path to foreign investment in Sri Lanka. We can talk a little bit more about that later.
And I would like to add another question into that. You've been sitting in many boards as a risk chairman. So how you weigh the risk and return in there? Because risk appetite, what matters most of the time. So as individuals, maybe as companies, how you look at it?
So I guess the specific appeal of real estate, the fact that it is tangible, is also the challenge with real estate. It's an illiquid asset. You know, if I want to invest in stocks, company shares, listed assets I'm talking about, or bonds, or currency, I can get in or out of a position, you know, I can build an investment and I can get out of it. It may not always be at an attractive price. Sometimes I may need to put on stop loss strategies, but I can get out. With real estate, it's harder. And the challenges then, therefore, in real estate, in making it more attractive, is to ease the path of exit. So, for example, more transparent. It's an illiquid asset. It is what it is. Globally, it is. But if there's more transparent data points around pricing, for example, if there are more transparent databases on where properties are bought and sold, whether it's apartments, whether it's land, that would encourage investor confidence and give more visibility. So if you just break it down very simply as an asset and transparent pricing and access to that data. And I know, again, Lanka Property Web is one of the few credible players in this market that maintains databases around pricing. That kind of stuff helps give investor confidence. You know that it's an illiquid asset, but you have that confidence that, okay, this is where properties are being bought and sold. There is a more transparent market around it rather than relying on just word of mouth, because we all know the games that are being played, that are played globally in real estate. So to encourage that investor confidence, transparent pricing, I think helps.
Yes,
Let me also add in one thing, actually, Jeevan. I think one of the things he said was like, yes, it's a very real, tangible asset, okay? And unlike the liquidity that you could get in a stock market or capital markets, which is there. However, I think that's another great advantage it has, Tell me how many people lost money in real estate. Tell me how many people who actually lost their money in the liquid assets, right? So that's I think something we should actually highlight as well. Because real estate, you might make less money in terms of annual returns. Capital gains, you catch up with whatever the capital markets and the stock markets give in, right? So you might not get the 30% that you're getting in the treasury bills or the bonds. Okay, you might get maybe 5% or 6% in rental yields, and then it adds up. But the risk factor of losing your money, we all know that everybody were on their pin saying that, okay, what's the haircut that every single person who invested in the government bonds? I mean, that's the most secure form of investment. In the most secure form of investment, we were still worried about, what is the haircut that's going to happen. So forget the insecure part of other investments. So I think real estate being very tangible is the advantage of real estate. So that is something. So yes, there's nobody who would actually say, hey, I put my money 10 years back and now my real estate has actually depreciated. That's, I think, very rarely in very cases where there is something went very wrong, right? So, but that's hardly, I haven't heard of anybody coming to me and said, I've lost money. So that is something I think we should also look at in terms of investing in real estate. It'll be very secure, safe. But if you're looking at quick money.
It's a very good point because it holds its value, again, particularly with high inflation. As we speak, one of the largest banks in the world is being restructured. It may not survive into next weekend. This is a big bank in Switzerland. It's being bailed out by the government as we speak. It is one of the largest holders of private wealth funds in the world. Globally, it cannot be allowed to fail. There will probably be a bailout. But it highlights to me that even keeping your money in a bank isn't safe. So real estate, again, as a diversification play, as a portfolio, has a very important role.
Yeah, that what we saw in H1 2022, where people, flooded into the property market and they bought, properties as a hedge against the inflation. And then again, when we talk about the treasury bills and treasury bonds, treasury bills rate as financial professional, we take it as a risk-free rate in our financial calculation. So it's around 25% up these days. So, Mr. Kushov, now we are part of emerging countries and there are competitors surrounding us. And so what are the opportunities you see in Sri Lanka against the other emerging economics?
So as I said, everybody is a competition. I keep telling in India how it works is every state competes with everybody else. So if you're actually looking at attracting investments from India, you are actually probably the 30th player who's trying to do it apart from all the states who are actually around trying to attract the same investment. So the guys in Hyderabad might be looking at investments from Delhi. Those guys in Bombay might be looking at attracting investments from Gujarat, which is already doing well. So there's a lot of competition regionally as well as globally. So one of the things that I think Sri Lanka has is the potential to grow. So when somebody actually that was a good example. I've heard it from one of people in Sri Lanka itself, and I think it's very common to say, when you fall from a mat, it doesn't get hurt so much, right? You can get back to the mat easily, and that's where we are. We can roll back to it. But when you actually grow up, the potential is huge. You can get onto a chair, you can get onto a bed. I mean, this is just an example of how you could go. But then when you are already on that height, it's very difficult for you to grow. So that's the advantage we have right now in Sri Lanka. I mean, that's gives it very easy thing to say. Like we have so much of potential to grow.
Yeah, for this question, I think both of you can answer for that. Like any noble success or challenges you have faced as a real estate investors in Sri Lanka, and what lessons you have learned from these experiences?
Lessons learned, challenges. I think the challenges are probably not materially different to any real estate investor globally. I think the things that we can do to make Sri Lanka a more attractive place for investment and real estate investment, there are a few easy wins that I can see. One is to have transparent, we talked about transparent pricing and so forth, transparent land registries and property data around ownership and title, so that there's full investor confidence that whatever investment opportunity, whether it's an apartment, whether it's a piece of land in the middle of nowhere, that there is clear legal title and the person who's selling it to you, who claims to own it, actually owns it. Now, there were various talks which became unfortunately highly politicized to make this happen, but really to move Sri Lanka and to attract real estate investment, because again, to Kishore's earlier point, real estate is only part of attracting FDI into Sri Lanka. That is the main game. And to develop this country, we need to do that. And real estate is an important part of it. Having clear access to legal title, having a database that is not some register of paper sitting in a Pradeshi Sabha in the middle of nowhere. That is important. There are a few other things we can talk about, but for me, that is the number one thing that we can do, and this is stuff that's within our control. Us as taxpayers and the politicians we vote for, we need to make this change.
Before Mr. Kishore answers that question, I would like to add something in there. Actually, as a company, Lanka Web, that's part of our objective is to have a confident investors, and then again to enhance the knowledge of real estate investors. That's why we made this market outlook report for the real estate, very comprehensive report for the industry. So actually we gifted that to create more confident and then again informed investors to Sri Lanka. So yeah, Mr. Kishore.
So I think to your question of challenges faced and what could be the way forward. The way forward, I think, is very clearly what Jivan said. You need to have access to database where it sits very hidden. I might have access and then somebody doesn't, and then that guy doesn't invest. So when there is clarity, when there is access to all these things, there'll be more and more people joining in investing into real estate and everything else, and that will be better for everybody, for the industry as well. So getting back to the challenges, of course, there are certain regulations that need to be controlled as well. So there are projects that have got stalled. I mean, we all know. I mean, everybody knows. Krish had basically got stalled. There was earlier, the Hyatt had actually got stalled as well. And then, of course, there are no apartment holders now, but earlier they were. Then there was Eco Homes, which is there. So I could actually see, just by thinking about it, we can think of 3 or 4 projects. So that was a challenge to the industry, not as an investor alone, but to the whole industry. Because the moment that whole concept of, the delivery was not done by certain developer doesn't affect only that developer, it affects everybody else. Okay, so that is something that needs to be looked at and seeing that how that could be prevented. And there should never be abandoned projects. So there should be a regulation where somebody takes it over and completes it, so that the investor has not lost his money, but overall the developer who hasn't developed it should be punished, because he should lose all the money that he's actually put in to build up a partly. Let's look at the hat. I mean, the structure is ready or whatever. So that could be given to the investors who purchased apartments in there. So these are the things that we need to look at. And then other thing actually I was looking at is, of course, for good investors, they need security. Right now there are ready apartments. Just like again, Jeevan mentioned this also, right? The investment that's already there, just buy it. The cost is less because they have actually incurred costs much before the inflation and all happened. Okay, so pick up the ready apartments. Then what happens? The new buildings also will come up because the demand gets created. You sweep up the whole stock in any business, clear the old stock, get back to the new stock. The new stock goes up in price. Naturally, the old stock goes up in price as well. So I think the challenges are those smaller projects that need to be controlled very well. Go ahead with the existing things would be a strategy right now. Because we have existing stock for various reasons, country situation, economic situation, all these things. COVID was one of the leading causes as well. And like you actually said, during COVID and everything else, there was opportunity in real estate. How many people tapped it? I don't know, I did. So I did, and then we purchased certain assets which actually went up 3 times in price in the last 2 years, which is excellent. So these are the opportunities that you need to look at as well. So the moment whoever looks at the opportunity gets benefited. So I think that's something you need to.
Yeah, I just pick up on Kishore's point. So I can't speak or read Chinese, but somebody told me that the character in Chinese for risk is the same character as opportunity, the same letter. It's of 2 sides of the same coin, right? Picking up on Kishore's point, one of the things that strikes me is that no country, I have in my previous life as a banker, seen many economic crises, the 1998 Asia financial crisis, the 2000 Russia default, the global financial crisis of 2008 and so forth. These all happened while in my career, my lifetime. No country goes through the kind of economic shocks that Sri Lanka suffers without significant banking sector reform. Many of our banks need cleaning up of the balance sheets. They need to do that to start lending to get this country to grow again. To clear the capital for them to start lending, they need to get rid of the dead wood, the dead assets. A lot of that is real estate. So there is a lot of talk about a bad debt bank or a bad asset bank. And a lot of countries did this. The US did this in 2008. Greece, Spain, Portugal, these are big turnaround stories out of the European financial crisis. Japan did it, where basically, and I think China has done it or is in the process of doing it, where there is a place for the banks to unload illiquid assets or assets that are below current market value so that they can clear up their balance sheets and lend again. Sri Lanka will probably need that. That is also an opportunity. That is also an opportunity for investors to come in and participate in the asset sales programs that will happen out of that.
Okay, yeah. As you mentioned, like opportunities and risk, so I would like to ask you this question: in what ways do you see the Sri Lankan real estate market to evolve over the next few years to come, and what potential risk and opportunities do you anticipate?
Okay, so the risks, again, sorry, Kishore said so many things earlier that, the risks are obvious ones, right? Stable real estate, stable foreign exchange rates are helpful in terms of planning your investment return. Stable foreign exchange rates are helpful. Flip side of that is that if you look at dollar cost per square foot of real estate in Sri Lanka now, after the devaluation we've had, we are damn competitive. We are attractive, right? For all of the kind of investment opportunities that are being showcased around this room, for example. But to my earlier point, you're probably better off looking at a mature asset that's been completed rather than one that is still a long way to complete. Okay? Because those dollar costs, building material costs and so forth could continue to escalate. I'm not going to have take views on the dollar and stuff, but just making the obvious that having a stable dollar exchange rate will probably help. It's a challenge right now with high interest rates, again, obviously, if the risk-free, so-called risk-free government bond yields are giving you 25-30% returns, then from an IRR perspective, a project to beat that is a damn challenge. So you will need to have interest rates stabilizing and returning back to sort of low double-digit levels, 10 to 15, maybe high, low 20s are probably a challenge. 10 to 15%, 18%, you can live with, you can work that into your returns. Otherwise, it's a significant headwind for any asset, whether it's a real estate asset or anything else, to beat that in terms of IRR. So there are a few things that obviously will, and political stability. More than political stability, policy consistency. Policy consistency. So that irrespective of what government comes into office every 4 years or whatever, that there is a continuation of policy. That's important to reassure investors. And for that, it's the probably the civil service and all of the support infrastructure around the people in parliament that's important. So it's the central bank, independence of central banks, the BOIs, all of that. I think it will be really important. And, they need to do this for the country.
Yeah, I think, Jeevan, that's a great point. I think one is having the right policies is one. Having the consistency in that policy is more important than having the right policy. Today, it should not be changing like from one policy today to another policy tomorrow. So that, I think, is something that the government should look at. And I think we will also promote it to the government, talk to the governments and say that we need to address these things. At various forums, we could address this. And the third point, actually, in terms of policies, are policy clarity, which there are policies, and assume that they are consistent. There is no clarity to the people. Everybody interprets in a different way, and that is also something that needs to be done up. So, like today, we know. I mean, I'm sure one of the questions from somebody would come in saying that, okay, can you just tell me very clearly what are the visas that we could get on our investment? I mean, like nobody knows. Everybody is still talking about various other things. That clarity needs to come in. What is the process? Do I just take my deed and go and I get my visas? Or do I go and get something else? Because that's the clarity. And not only that, in terms of every other investment, any investment for that matter, requires that. So I think good you brought that up. And I'm sure we'll take it up at various forums as well.
I'll just take two examples, okay? SIA accounts, or in their previous version, Sia Accounts. You ask 3 different banks about the process to set up an SIA account so you can bring money into the country as an investor into anything, real estate or any other financial instrument. And then, okay, leaving aside the capital challenges at the moment because of the country situation, the process to take money out once you sell the asset and realize your capital gains. You talk to 3 different banks, you get 3 different views. Why? Because because the authorities have deferred this to the banks and the banks' compliance departments. The banks are being overly cautious and interpreting this in their own way, and so there is no real clarity there. That's just one example.
I think that's a perfect example, because I still remember, I mean, when I came in, it was Sierra, then it became SIA, then it became IIA and whatever. That's fine. We can call whatever it is, but then consistency. To be very frank, I think the central bank guidelines are very clear, but the banks interpret it as very different things, each one interpreting in a very different way. I think that's something we need to change, I mean, it's actually very favorable for an investor to come, put in the money, get your returns, whatever, and then send it out. But the bank said, no, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Yeah. The other example, how are we for time?
No, we have enough time.
The other example is foreign, simple one, right? Foreign ownership of real estate in this country. I'm not talking about this business about 6th floor and above rubbish, right? I'm talking about tangible assets, land, real estate development. Now, this forum is supposed to be about hidden investment opportunities. For me, the biggest hidden investment opportunity, the most successful example I can think of in the last 25 years are the guys, the foreign investors who bought into Gaul Fort and around Gaul in 2006. Before the war, before the end of the war, these are people who were living overseas, who took a view, took a punt, and how successful they are. I don't know what it is now, but 5 years ago, the price per perch in Gaul Fort was more than Colombo 7. These guys made a lot of money. They took a view. But the policy changes. Foreigners allowed to buy property in land. Then they were not allowed to buy. Then they set up companies through which they buy. Then the companies have to be majority owned by Sri Lankans, so they put nominees or lawyers or whoever has funds. They're still doing this, right? That stretch between, for example, Gaul through to Mirissa and now Hirikitiya, there's a lot of foreign ownership there, and that's right. It should be the case. We shouldn't deter it. We shouldn't discourage it. To get FDI into this country, we should encourage investment. Real estate, back to this point, is part of that. We shouldn't create obstacles to that. But this whole policy inconsistency and interpretation changes. Why make it so hard?
True.
These are easy wins to get money into this country.
Jivan, I want to add to that actually. I agree partly, and I'm afraid I disagree on certain things for the love of Sri Lanka. Actually, one of the things I agree with you, the growth that has happened, wherever the time where Mirissa developed, Gaul developed, I mean, look at the destinations. It wouldn't have happened if not for these foreign investors coming and investing into those areas. We didn't see the potential. Somebody else saw it and they invested in it, took the risk to grow. So that's an excellent initiative. I think hats off to the people who initially opened it up as well for foreign investment. It's good. I also agree with you on the way it is being handled when the loopholes are there. So you form a company, you do all these things. You know, why do we need to go all this? Make it very clear. Anybody invests in whatever. The only thing which I don't agree with all those investments that came in and whatever is, Sri Lanka is a small island. We have limited coastal area, okay? It's limited coastal area with places where we could access as well and whatever. So, if you go to Gaul today, if you go to some other place, you can't find land, and hence the price goes up because everybody has blocked it. Go to even earlier, Gaul wasn't available, now Talpe isn't available, then, you know, all these places are getting busy. So one of the things I disagree on principally, which I say Sri Lanka loses out when you let these things happen, is underutilization of those lands. There is demand for beach lands which could put up a hotel, which could generate employment for 100, 200 people, which could generate more foreign exchange coming in year on year, and assume the same thing held by one person as his villa, holding 1 acre of land and not generating any revenue for the country, not generating as much employment. He might have hired 3 people or 4 people in relation to having 100 people. So that is something I'm very, very particular about, saying that yes, give the ownership, foreign ownership, make it very clear, but make sure it's being utilized for the purpose of what it is being done. So a lot of people just buy this and keep their villa, lock up and keep and everything. Do villas. I'm pro villas as well, but do villas in such a way that there's multiple villas coming up, because unfortunately we don't have unlimited coastal land. Okay, so we need to have this. So I always on this as a foreigner, I would easily promote a lot of Indians to come and buy land and everything, and there are people. But I actually discourage that. I said, if you're not utilizing the land fully, think of the country. The country is going to lose out. So we need to make sure the land is utilized, but yes, allow foreigners to come, use the land and develop it. develop it for the sake of the country. And we are going to bring this country up.
Do something or get out of the way.
Correct.
No, it's a good point, but I think there are solutions to this. Proper land planning is again something that we can do better in this country. There is a lot of, so if you think about the amount of land that is sitting underutilized or, could be better utilized with if it's used differently, just within a half an hour drive from where we are here at the Kingsbury. How much land is held by government departments, ministries, officers, so forth, that could be unleashed if those governments, if those institutions were moved to the suburbs or moved to other cities, to Galle, to Kandy, to other areas? Think of the capital, the value that could be unlocked and unleashed. So this is when now we're talking about land planning. And so absolutely, but there are ways to do that. A similar example, we're talking about real estate, is proper regulation and development around the construction quality. Touch wood, we haven't had significant issues recently, but I'm thinking of the Turkey earthquake and the amount of bad real estate practices that arose, that were highlighted due to poorly constructed buildings, and how many lives were needlessly lost there. So it's examples around land planning again and construction planning that can be done better, can be done a lot better.
So I think there is a lot of potential. Allow the investors to come in and develop, plan it accordingly, give them guidelines.
But control it.
Control it. Give them guidelines, You say, you're taking this beach land, you could develop so much, it would generate so much. I think there's a great potential on that.
I think it's more about the uniformity of the procedures, application, and the consistency of the policies. When the government change, the policy should not change to create the investor confidence and keep it going. So I think Mr. Kishore had and having many discussions with policymakers and decision makers and the who govern the industries as well. So how the liberalization of the policies in investment policies, and as an Indian and a long-standing Indian in Sri Lanka, so how do you look at that?
So I think at various forums we've been meeting, recommending certain things for policies, recommending certain things. I think that's what we could contribute. I mean, suggest it, and then the government thinks it's right and they do it. So we've been doing all these things. See, one of the things I would actually say about the point Jeevan just mentioned, so much of land which is there, which has so much potential of just a government office sitting there underutilized completely, right? So I think the best example we could give is look at where Shangri-La is. Look at where ITC 1 is coming up. ITC is going to be a beautiful property that actually comes up when it comes up. It's got this beautiful sky bridge. I mean, various things happening there as well. That was the military, the army barracks, which was, for years, nobody did it. So hats off to the government for actually releasing all that land and doing up the thing. Yes, of course, there was Slave Island behind Cinnamon Life. We had these slums, basically, which was there. Tata Housing came in, took them over, converted all those into condominiums, and opened up so much of land out there which could be utilized. So these things are happening. I think thanks to the government as well right now, I think we've done so much of at various forums where we actually came out saying that we need to unleash, and the government actually set up various groups or committees now to basically look at unleashing these potentials, whether it's Hilton or whether it's Golf Face Hotel, not the Golf Face, the Grand Oriental Hotel, or other things that are there, and the land banks that are there. I think along with BOI and the government, they are on the right track of identifying and getting and unleashing all these potential things. So, so getting back to your question, yes, we do propose a lot of policies and everything for this, and I think the way we are going, It's going on good, so it could be faster. You could think that it could be always faster than what it is happening. But yes, we are on a good front, so I think I'll say I'm positive.
So, just to pick up on Kishore's point, again, that Chinese character, risk and opportunity. Out of every crisis, there are opportunities, because crisis force changes that otherwise are uncomfortable. Out of every crisis, there's an opportunity. Let's not lose the opportunity that's coming out of this crisis. Let's not lose the opportunity. It's a good time to get those changes done. You know, when I think about Sri Lanka, and Kishore answered this question, why not Sri Lanka? I think we have this island mentality sometimes. We think of Sri Lanka as a bubble. We kind of forget what's going on around. In India is the #1 hot investment destination for 2023. Everybody wants a piece of India. We are looking at strategically where we are. Kishore again answered that so elegantly. We could position ourselves to piggyback off that. Just the physical distance and connectivity and the cultural connections. If you look at things like how successful Malaysia has done this My Dreams Home, or My Second, I forget which was, My Dream Home. Why can't we resuscitate that? We tried this a few times, back to again Kishore's point about that golden visa thing. Simplify it. Portugal is doing it for European investors. Why can't we do this for Asians? And if I look at the big capital flows coming out of this repositioning of manufacturing out of China into Cambodia, Vietnam, to some extent Malaysia, Bangladesh, have really benefited from that. We can also take a piece of that action. So these are the opportunities coming out of the currently available. And that's what we should grab.
I think that's one of the points I was actually telling Tarinder when you started the topic. When we said we'll discuss this, I said we discuss the topic actually is every crisis has an opportunity. And he actually did a nice poster. Actually, I asked him whether he could actually display so everybody else could have a look at it as well. It actually said every crisis has an opportunity. And that's what we're going to talk about, you know. So, and of course on the things like where we said about My Dream Home and other things, Sri Lanka has the Golden Visa programs and other things as well, but there's no clarity. Nobody's aware of it. No, and you go to immigration, they say, yes, it's there.
Shout it out.
Yeah,
shout it out.
Shout it out. You know, we should actually, the way Malaysia shouted, the whole world knew that there was a My Dream Home option at Malaysia. So those are things I think that we need to do, which I think we will. So getting back to the point of everybody's looking at India, right? Where was India 15 years back? To be very frank, if I had to, luckily I came out of India 30 years back or 25 years back. If I had to move out of India now, I wouldn't. I would look at so much of opportunity there. Everybody would have basically been, wouldn't have been based here. I wouldn't have looked at Sri Lanka, though it has so much of potential, right? I would have been there looking at India and saying there's so much of potential. That's the potential we need to piggyback on, as you rightly said. You know, India has grown leaps and bounds. It's growing the potential of it growing further is there. Digitalization is something that India did. Every single guy on the road could actually do digital transactions of currency, which is you go to a shop, you go to a literal take a day. You take your phone and you do your digital transaction, which wouldn't have happened. Digitalization of India has happened so much in the last few years. India had just shot up with digitalization as well. So one of the things that I was actually talking to some of the government officials and mentioning it as well was, we need to digitalize Sri Lanka. You know, learn from what India has done. You know, so many things. It just happened in no time. There's so much of potential for Sri Lanka to go. Whether there is IT industry booming in Sri Lanka, in India or whatever, we just need to take a small piece from India for that. And Indians are really more than willing to basically come and invest and take that along. Tourism, I mean, we just need to look at a small piece of the outbound tourists from India to just flow in. So a few days back, I was on the MICE convention panel as well, and then we were discussing about attracting Indian tourists coming over. So there is so much potential in tourism, tourists coming over as well. So we just, as we said, Sri Lanka has a lot of potential, which India cannot match in terms of the literacy rate of the people, in 93%, the standards of civic sense. The roads are clean. One of the things which most of the Indians say when they come in here is, oh, Sri Lanka is so clean, we love it. So I would hardly say that I haven't come across anybody who say that, oh, I came to Sri Lanka, I didn't really like it. There's nobody, it's zero. So basically there is so much of potential. They come in, take the country along. And one of the things that I always thought India and Sri Lanka shared in terms of relationship, there is no big brother, mother, all these things. We said we are twins of the same culture. The mother is the culture and both are equal twins. Sri Lanka has so much culture, I mean, if you talk about Mahavamsa, which is basically the oldest documented history, I don't think India knew about King Ashoka only reading it through Mahavamsa. So Sri Lanka has so much culture that's hidden, that's there, and India has equal amount of culture and other things. So we are all from the same culture. So there is no reason why you can't partner up and grow together. And one of the things that has happened, one of the things when Sri Lanka was in crisis, whether it was COVID, vaccines coming into Sri Lanka from India, when the whole world shut down and said they want their own vaccines, India said, no, we'll give it to Sri Lanka. Or whether it's IMF, the present crisis, when the IMF talks were happening, Indian the finance minister went up and said, we take the responsibility, please give money to Sri Lanka, or please go look at it positively. And the $4 billion that came in, all that came in without expecting anything. They just said, no, we're just twins, we're just cultural twins. And I think I'm getting a little emotional with the relationship and everything and talking too much about it, so I'll rest it there, but I think we can grow together.
But just to one point, picking up from investment in India and the Indian growth story, one of the successes, particularly the current government in India has really capitalized on, is this tapping into the strong diaspora network, using that to attract capital and talent back to India. And this is something that we need to do better. Yes. There is so much goodwill from people like me. My home is Sydney. There's so many people like me, Sri Lankans living overseas, who want to do something for this country. But sometimes it's hard. Because not all of us, I have a dual citizenship. Not all of us can get dual citizenship. Sometimes the host country, their new home, prevents them from taking out dual citizenship. Why make it hard for those people to buy land in Sri Lanka because they don't have Sri Lankan citizenship or dual citizenship? Why should they be deprived of investing back in their motherland and helping the motherland develop? Change these things. Now's the time.
I think that's a great point, Jeevan. I think India's, one of the recoveries when the economic crisis happened was the diaspora sent deposits to India. Just when our financial reserves were going down, the diaspora did put in investments. Everybody.
The Indian IT industry
Correct.
is all the Indians who went to Silicon Valley and coming back.
And setting up offices and everything. There's so much of potential. I think Sri Lankan diaspora also needs to step in, help Sri Lanka recover with this whole thing.
Give them the chance.
And to do that, the government of Sri Lanka need to help the diaspora do that. Because as you rightly said, the diaspora is ready to do it. It's just that they didn't know how to do it because suddenly there is no clarity again. Policy, get a beautiful policy to have diaspora come in, give them the facilities, give them everything else. I think this is another point I think we'd also like to discuss with the government to basically say help the diaspora to build up Sri Lanka. Help them. They will do the rest of it.
Yeah. Actually, we have decent infrastructure and then again right set of labor, skilled labor in Sri Lanka, so that any investor would love to have it. So with that, I would like to open the discussion to the forum if there's any questions. No.
It sits in the same building as the UDA. And the job of the NPP is really to work with the Treasury, who is doing would have once upon a time done the 5-year plans and all of that, to work with the environmental and the wildlife authorities, to agriculture department, and all of them to come up with an overall spatial plan for the country. And that is the plan that is then supposed to feed into what the UDA does. However, this entire thing is dysfunctional. Nobody actually works with the NPP. The Mahavali Authority does its own thing. The Agricultural Department does its own thing. So I think there's a real need to really push for this kind of integrated planning, both that is economic, which is spatial, where you're using unutilized land for the right purposes or barren land for the right purposes, not wasting or the land that we already have. Yeah. That's just a comment. Yeah. But I also had a question. When in this forum, when we talk about real estate, we are really talking about multifamily condominium units. And currently, most of these multifamily condominiums are being marketed to a very luxury segment. My question is, what would it take for established and well-run developing companies or investors to pivot towards marketing towards family homes for a larger segment of the population, not just the luxury market? Because that's also, they're going to get a larger market, so to speak. And what would that take?
I think I'll take that. Actually, what you see here is not what a whole of Sri Lanka is right now. So we see condominiums, because I suppose that's the target audience in today's discussion and whatever. So you see a lot of these things. But if you look at it, there are a lot of these guys doing what you're actually saying. For affordable housing, there's a little bit of it where the government, of course, needs to step in discounting those things. But apart from being discounted, but still affordable ones, are like, there are groups which actually do land sales, which is happening, which is also, but you won't see it today, but there are things that are happening. There are actually homes that are happening. There are companies doing multiple small houses which are affordable, which is much cheaper than even the condominiums that you look at here. So I think saying that it's not happening is not right, but yes, it is happening. There is a policy in place, and I think your comment on the national planning thing is, I think, excellent. That's exactly what I want to say. Yes, we have a division, but it's underutilized as well.
Yeah, I guess just to add to that, think of the other opportunities which are happening but not enough. I think these things will accelerate. The demographics will force these changes. Think about gated communities. Whether it's luxury, high-end gated communities, there are a few of those. There's scope for a lot more. Or even aiming at more the middle market, which has got the compromise sort of mix of why do people go into these condominiums? A lot of the time it's the security, it's the shared services that otherwise, if they were owning that same plot of land, they would have to have a gardener, maintenance, security, backup electricity, standby generator if the electricity supply fails. Think of all the advantages and facilities. To have that in a gated community, so those changes are coming, maybe not fast enough.
Yeah, I'm not saying build gated communities. I'm actually saying build dense urban housing in the center city, because now you can focus on your infrastructure and people don't, you're not spreading your infrastructure.
No, you're saying build more dense infrastructure in the center of the city. Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I think the urbanization of the people living outside is very important for any city to grow, and that's where when I spoke about the population in the presentation, I think when I mentioned the population of Colombo is so small, it's not growing. It's very limited. So yes, I think that's the point that needs to happen as well. But in order to that to happen, it still has to be vertical.
Yeah.
Because we don't have that much land in Colombo, so it has to go vertical. Yeah, so vertical things would happen. I think there are people looking at it as well, I think.
If you take Colombo, it's like 3,717, the population density in Colombo district. And then again, that's why we need more verticals coming in, because about 25% of the population living in Western Province, and Western Province claim for only for 6% of the land. And then again, I think Urban Development Authority, yesterday morning discussion, we had Deputy Director General of Urban Development Authority. They are the major producers of houses for the general public, and I think there are contracts and coming up projects with PPPs, public-private partnership projects to come up. So with that, I think your question is more valid, and that would be addressed by them in that case. I think when it comes to the private sector, their involvement in developing houses for the low income to mid income range, there's a mismatch in there, but that's what Urban Development Authority is looking after.
So the thing is that the government can only build so much. They are not in the building business. Developers are.
Yes.
And the developers need to pivot to serving this market, which is maybe 80% of Sri Lanka's population. High-rise housing, center city, with good infrastructure, good quality housing. What would that take? That's the...
Yeah, so I think, see, a private investor would always invest if there is returns, if there is potential. And I think there is potential, so people are looking at doing it. The land in the center of the city is expensive, so they would like to maximize the utilization of it, so that nobody would want to build an apartment where they don't really recover their profits out of it, right? So it's a private thing. So
it's a bottom line objective, because private sector
so
is
it's a private sector is actually profit driven, which it should be. I mean, nobody would want to construct something and say I would make a loss and I would want to deliver certain things, right? So private sector is profit driven, and then it would actually work out. I would give you a good example. I think John Kills had started this other condominiums, which is much reasonable than other condominiums, for the reason that they realized, okay, if the parcels are smaller, the value could be smaller, and then there would be enough more potential, more people that could afford it as well. So yes, again, it's a business plan which is a successful business model.
Yeah. But you start with, exactly right, you start with the price of land, and to change that dynamic, better land planning.
Correct.
Right? It starts there. And then you look at the other challenges that a developer faces. You can't have a vibrant real estate industry without having a vibrant construction industry. There's a lot of challenges that the construction industry is facing, not just now it's acute, but having access to building material at a competitive rate, and being able to import building material to lower the price. Otherwise, we are in many of these things, they're operating in oligopolies, in protected markets. Likewise, access to labor. Multiple governments have talked about emulating, making Sri Lanka another Singapore. And every time I hear that, I have a chuckle to myself, because Singapore was built by imported labor. And if we want to do what Singapore did, we might need to rethink the way we are approaching this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Actually, it didn't really occur to me as well. Like, whether you talk about Dubai or whether you talk about Singapore, everything is built on imported labor, right? I mean, they wouldn't have. So I think sometimes we need to think for ourselves as well. We can't be in a cocoon. You need to open up. We need to really open up and say that, we need to do these things.
Yes. Sometimes maybe when you are more resourceful, we don't see the value in it. That's maybe the reason. So any other questions?
My question is to Mr. Jeevan William. You said Sri Lanka needs to improve on the transparency of deeds. Now the issue is most of us are familiar only how things are done in Sri Lanka, where the deed is registered with the land registry and corresponding land plan is usually not registered, and therefore no records of a land plan and blah blah blah. But anyway, what I would like to know is, from your experience, can you elaborate thoroughly how transparency of ownership is done in foreign countries?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example of, I guess the one I'm most readily used to is Australia, in New South Wales, state of New South Wales. The title deed is scanned and digitized, and the land management officers manage the scanned, digitized title deeds. Not just the title deed of, say, my property. So if you're looking at buying my property, you can go online and check the title deed. You can also check the pedigree. You know, with the title deed also, who's bought it before me, who's bought it before them, all the way back in history. So having that, both the pedigree of transactions, who bought it from whom, when, not the prices. The prices are also, I think, available at a price. So like real estate agents and stuff, I think, can access that information. But so the stamp duty payment, you know, on which the stamp duty payments were paid, for example, those prices are also available. But you can access the pedigree as well as the title. And if the title has changed due to planning changes, you know, that is also accessible digitized. Likewise, the area around which the property is built. So for example, if there's changes in zoning, if it is being changed from commercial use to housing use, or vice versa, or multi-sector, or if there's highways and infrastructure coming, if the railway is planning to put a rail line through the neighborhood, all of those things are available, the plans are available digitally, online. So I don't have to run from A to B to C physically and spend 2-3 days getting this information. It's all there. So that's an example. It's digital, it's simple. And you think about, back to the point that we made earlier, how much opportunities the IT industry in this country would benefit by doing this. Right? I'm sure maybe you can talk about how the Indian IT industry benefited from all of the digitization that underwent in India.
I think a good point. Actually, digitization is very important. Right now, the same records are available from the land registry, right? I mean, we have land registry that is giving you a record of going back to whatever transaction period. Some of them are not registered, some of them are registered. Priority takes over the ones that are registered. So we need to look at, one of it is, of course, the policy to make it compulsory that whatever happens in terms of transaction should be there. If it is not there, it is not valid. So like most of the property, the ownership certificate, including Colombo properties, the town hall basically municipality had to come over and say, each one is showing a different record. The ownership is being shown as some old owner, though that transactions have happened. Because the process itself is killing. The guy says, oh, forget it, I'm not going to go and register my ownership because it takes too high, too long, everything. So digitization is very, very important. I think, like you said, India's boom was this. Just going digital for every single thing. And it not just helped the IT industries, all the surrounding things also. The IT industry, so I was telling somebody, just digitize, if the government starts digitizing few things and start giving IT industries to come in, once they come in, what are they going to do? They're going to get more business from abroad. And that's what has happened in India. You give the initial boost by giving the local jobs, and then it will automatically. And these things, there are foreign donors and funders that are available to government of Sri Lanka, to utilize them to even fund these digitization programs. There's huge potential.
All this has been, we're not talking about rocket science, reinventing the wheel here. This has all been done. We're just talking about bringing best practices. Just to extend this point, using blockchain technology to create digital ledgers of transactions. So that if I bought a property from him and he has bought a property from him, that is they are in a blockchain. I think Canada's done it. I think Singapore's done it. You know, this stuff's been done. And our IT guys can do it. We have smart IT guys.
I think the Monato University has some of the best IT guys, I think. And I mean, the local IT industry is very vibrant.
Any other questions?
So what you are saying is not that the deed that is published online, just a summary of who purchased from who. Just a thing.
You can do both. You can do both. But those are details.
If the deed is published online, the price is usually indicated. That's fine.
So that's fine. So
is the deed published or not published?
you can see the deed. You can see a scanned copy of the deed.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So all details are there.
But that is one example.
What about the plan?
The plan is there. The plan and the deed are there. That is one example. Right? Other countries might have different ways of doing it. But this is not. This has been done multiple times. It's not new. We can take whatever works for us. That can also evolve, but start somewhere.
Okay. Any other questions?
So if you name first to 10, what are the obstacles?
What are the?
Obstacles, what are the problems?
Look, I think we've talked about some of them.
No, I mean if you categorize the important wise, say number 1, number 2 likewise.
Let me actually, in the present scenario, right now, the impression people have abroad for investments is Sri Lanka is unsafe, we don't have electricity, we don't have petrol, we don't have... So the image building is very important, right? So there are so many things. We can talk about all the things later. First thing is to generate interest. That is not happening because of the exposure we have got. Okay? So that is something that could be changed as well. So that is something we need to address first. That Sri Lanka is safe, Sri Lanka is good, the value has and advantages. So I would always say, I would not say these are the problems. If, like you said, give me 10 problems what we need to address. I would not say that. I would leave the problems aside. I'd say I'll give you 10 attractions that why you need to come into Sri Lanka. And that's the positive way of thinking and saying, come into Sri Lanka. So I think it will work out. When you keep thinking positive, naturally everything else will click in as well. So we need to change all these things, and we just need to say, instead of saying, hey, the problem is that the first number 1 problem is that the image of Sri Lanka is bad or whatever. I would say the first thing that we need to do is to make sure that, why we are good to invest. So that's why it said, why Sri Lanka, why not Sri Lanka, right? So those are the things. So
yeah.
Each an angle for
Yeah, how do you eat an elephant? One small piece at a time. You can eat an elephant one piece at a time. So rather than looking at all the problems and listing all the challenges, let's just focus on a few easy wins, right? We talked about some of them. Having clear access to transparent title deeds is one. Okay. Making it easier for diaspora investors, for example, just one subset of the overseas investors, to invest in this country is another. Simplifying the visa rules, including this golden visa or my dream, is the third. Now, which of those is the most important? I don't know. But all of these things we can do. And these are all, forget about the things that are outside of our control. There may be a global recession going on at the moment. That might affect foreign capital flows and so forth. Those are well outside our control. Let's focus on the things that are within our control.
I have a good suggestion for the Hum and the team. Regarding the visas, why don't you guys go sit with the immigration department, clarify every single thing, and publish it on your website. Online. Saying that we've done it. You invest this is the process, this is what it is. I think number 1, you're going to get more clicks on your thing, just to come and read what are the policies as well. Okay. Number 2, of course, will help all the investors to invest in as well. So I think we have certain things, but we are not publicizing it as well. So I think we need to do those things. you know.
Yeah, actually, we are promoting the Golden Paradise Visa scheme. Don't know whether it's very much attractive to the foreign investors to invest in Sri Lanka when compared to the Malaysia and other competing countries. But we do promoting actually. That's what we
I'll
want
say
to
create
yeah.
a process
Yeah.
because clarity isn't still there, right? So if you say visa advantages in Sri Lanka and just
Sure.
a category by itself, where people click on it and say, okay, you invest 75,000, you get so many years of visa, and the process is this. That's what is required. Because I know there is a visa, but I still, I mean, even myself, even interacting with them so much,
Yeah.
I mean, I still think there are doubts in my own head.
You
So
talk to three people, you get three different opinions. You know, you think of also the supporting infrastructure that can be done, right? Clear legal services. Who are the best lawyers to help you as an overseas investor who knows a little bit about the country to buy property? Who are the guys to go to, right? Who are the guys if you want to buy a property and you want someone else to manage it? Who are the best people to manage your property for you? To clean it, to ensure that the tenant is looking after the property. Think of all the other markets. This is like an IT industry. You build the you build the environment, and you get all these other businesses that can start to flourish around them. It's like Uber. You create Uber and then suddenly so you're creating jobs for so many people. Food delivery, taxi drivers. You know, you create that infrastructure. And you create the supporting services. There's another whole sector that will flourish.
Yes, time is up for us to wind up the discussion today, and we can, let's have one more question.
So as you know, the VAT and the SSCL is now applicable on new developments in the country. So looking from a perspective of investments or as a developer, now it would primarily be implicated on new developments coming through which are sold in the primary market, whereas there's an exception for the secondary sales that's happening in the market. How would this affect to both developers as the real estate market going forward? Would it curtail the development, or would it be a big hindrance for the scope of the market?
I'll address that clearly. See, so what's VAT? Basically, it's value-added tax. So when a developer is developing an apartment, he incurs certain amount of tax anyway, right? He's buying his steel or sand or whatever he is buying, he's incurring VAT on it. He's buying concrete or cement or whatever. He sets off his costs against input against the output VAT, right? So he sets it off and he has a small percentage that is left, which is a 4% of a percent, which adds to the value of the development. So I personally don't think there is any problem with this whole VAT thing coming in or out. It has to be a policy. Again, as I said, it should be a standard policy where it doesn't change. So suddenly you can't say there is no VAT on apartments, and after a few months you say there's VAT on apartments, and after that you go back and say no VAT on apartments. Ideally, residences, because the secondary sale is not having VAT, it should not have VAT. Ideally, in that whole scenario. So there is a standard thing, whether you're a developer, whether you're a seller, whether everybody is on the same line. So now what has happened, the completed apartments, which have not taken the VAT, input VATs, and then but they still have to charge VAT. Now that's the problem that we are facing right now. The guy is, let's say there is a building in the apartment where 50 units had been sold and 50 units the developer has to sell. The developer is charging the VAT in addition to that. However, the person who's already bought it is not charging VAT on that. So that clarification, that's the only problem I think the government needs to look in, which we have made representations. So from the Condominium Developers Association, which I'm one of the founder board members and I'm on the board as well. And we have made representations to address this particular issue where the completed apartments are at a disadvantage right now because they can't set off the VAT against input and output VATs, right? So unfortunately the government didn't really respond very positively on it till now. I hope they will look at it even in the future. Completed apartments should not have VAT, period. Once you have a COC, there should be no VAT after that. So the developer also rushes in. He makes sure that, he gets his input and whatever, because he can't take input VAT and wait for 10 years and then claim VAT as well, right? So he rushes in as well. So I think that particular thing, right now, I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage. Having VAT is not a disadvantage or an advantage. It will be standard, that's fine, because you're only claiming the only value addition to it, right? So the developer should not worry about, whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage if he can take the benefit on both sides. The only disadvantage is for the properties that have been completed and which has COCs and they are older than 1 year old or something on completion.
Yes. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Kishore, and thank you, Mr. William, joining us today. Over to you, Kasan.
Thank you very much.